Okay, this is Trig Unit number 2 review, questions number 23 through 26. Solve the equation on the interval 0 is less than or equal to theta, which is less than 2 pi. So our values can be 0 and up to 2 pi, but not including. So the first one, number 23, asks me to solve, and it says 2 cosine theta plus 3 equals 2. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract 3 and off of both sides, and when I do that I get 2 cosine theta equals negative 1. Okay, at this point I want to divide both sides by 2, and when I do that I get cosine theta equals negative 1/2. So where does cosine equal negative 1/2? It equals negative 1/2 in quadrants 2 and 3. I used all students take calc. Remember, those show all the positive angles, so cosine is negative in those two quadrants. Therefore, the angles that match up to that, and you are welcome to use your unit circle or triangles, but if you use a unit circle or triangles, you're going to find that the answer is 2 pi over 3 and also 4 pi over 3, which corresponds to answer C. So let's look at 24 together. 24 states that we have 4 sine squared theta minus 3 equals 0. So the first thing I'm going to do is add 3 to both sides, and I'm left with 4 sine squared theta equals 3. The next thing I want to do is divide both sides by 4, and when I do that I get sine squared theta equals 3/4. Now I want to take the square root of both sides, so you're seeing that done right now. And remember, when you use the square root property, you get a plus or minus. So that's why I have the plus or minus radical 3 over 4. Okay, so squaring a square root gives me just sine theta, and it equals plus or minus radical 3 over radical 4. Now I know radical 4 is 2, so this equals radical 3 over 2. So sine theta equals plus or minus radical 3 over 2. Now, since I have plus or minus values, I have all 4 quadrants. Sine is positive in quadrants 1 and 2, and negative in quadrants 3 and 4. So, I need to find where sine theta equals radical 3 over 2, or negative radical 3 over 2. So if you use your unit circle, you're going to find the answer to that is pi over 3, 2 pi over 3, 4 pi over 3, and 5 pi over 3. So those 4 angles will satisfy this equation. Alright, now let's look at the next slide. Okay, so we did number 23 and 24, so let's look at number 25. So number 25 states that we have cosine squared theta plus 2 cosine theta plus 1 equals 0. What I would do is I would go ahead, wherever you see cosine, I would put in an x. So x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. So once again, I let x equal cosine theta. Okay, so now I'm going to factor this out. So I get x, and I get plus 1, and it equals 0. So x plus 1 equals 0 is what I have to solve. Remember, x equals cosine theta. So go ahead and substitute that back in. So I'm looking for where cosine theta equals negative 1. So if you use your unit circle, you'll see that cosine theta equals negative 1 at pi. So my answer is pi, and that corresponds to the answer C on the review sheet. Alright, so let's go ahead and do number 26. So number 26 asks us to solve 2 cosine squared theta minus 3 cosine theta plus 1 equals 0. Okay, so once again, let x equal cosine theta. So if I do that, I get 2x squared minus 3x plus 1 equals 0. Factoring that out, I get 2x and x, and then minus 1 equals 0. Now, I have 2x minus 1 equals 0, and I have x minus 1 equals 0. Resubstituting in cosine, I get 2 cosine theta minus 1 equals 0. 2 cosine theta equals 1. Cosine theta equals 1/2. So where does cosine theta equal 1/2? Cosine is positive in quadrants 1 and in quadrant 4. So for that one, we get pi over 3. That's a quadrant 1 angle. And then 5 pi over 3 is the quadrant 4 angle. Once again, use your unit circle. Look for where cosine theta equals 1/2. Remember, you're looking at your x values. Okay, over here we have x minus 1 equals 0. So substitute in cosine theta for x minus 1 equals 0. Cosine theta equals 1. Where does cosine theta equal 1? And if you look on the unit circle, you look at the x values, you'll find it's at 0. So putting the numbers in order, your answer is going to be 0, pi over 3, 5 pi over 3. And that is your answer. That corresponds to letter D. All right, so we have one more left that's going to have its own video, and yeah, you're almost there.